All right, everybody, welcome to the show. I'm going to give you guys an update on what's going on with the Donald Trump raid in Mar-a-Lago. He had taken some classified or top secret documents. In fact, the classification for some of the documents that he took was the highest possible classification that you literally are not allowed to take out of a sealed and protected room. So, again, I'm going to give you more on that in a little bit. I do have a lot of stuff to get to today. Tulsi Gabbard filled in for Tucker Carlson, and she sounded exactly like Tucker Carlson while doing that. Marjorie Taylor Greene wants to now impeach Merrick Garland. What more is there to say about that? Later on, I have a little bit of Alex Jones for you. Alex Jones is back on air after, being sued to the gills and having to pay out roughly $17 quadrillion. And he's right back at it, man. He's right back at it, saying some very bizarre things, to say the least. We'll dive into that. And new midterm numbers, they may surprise you a little bit. They may surprise you just a little bit. So anyway, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started here. Let's jump right into it. So first, a couple updates on what happened with the FBI raid of Mar-a-Lago and the crimes in question. So Maggie Haberman says the following. She's of the New York Times. At least one lawyer for Trump signed a written statement for the Justice Department asserting all documents with classified markings in the boxes had been returned after a June 3rd meeting, which could explain why obstruction statute was listed on the warrant. So I'm going to get to all the charges in just a second, all the charges that were in the warrant. Trump had the ability, if he wanted to release the warrant when he was raided. He chose not to do that. And then Merrick Garland basically called Trump's bluff and did a press conference and said, we're, basically going to a judge to try to get that warrant unsealed, given the unusual, high-profile nature of what went on here. So basically that was him calling Trump's bluff and saying, well, yeah, I'm going to show everybody why you didn't want to release that warrant, because a lot of the things in there were kind of embarrassing. So now we know a little bit of the backstory, and what happened was FBI agents had gone to Mar-a-Lago previously, and they talked to Trump and said, hey, dog, we know that there's quite a few boxes with some classified documents and top secret documents here. We're going to go ahead and need those back. So they went and talked to him on some regular shit. And, Trump was effectively like, oh, yeah, totally, no problem at all. We're going to go ahead and turn all those over. And then he turned some of them over, but they knew he didn't turn other ones over. And so then we get this update to the story, which is that a lawyer for Trump was like, no, all of it was turned over. Now, there's a few problems with this. Number one, it's a lie. All this stuff wasn't turned over. That's a wee bit of a problem. Number two, the lawyers, by law, are not even allowed to see these documents. So if they saw those documents, perhaps that's another crime on top of the other however many crimes we're now working with. She continues here and says, the Justice Department also saw something on surveillance footage that had been subpoenaed of the storage area that concerned them. It was unclear what period of time the footage was from. The meeting on June 3rd came after a subpoena for material was issued by the Justice Department. Material was turned over at the meeting. Trump said Friday that he had declassified all the material in his possession while he was still president. He provided no documentation to back the statement. So that's one of Trump's dodges now, is he's saying, no, I had a standing order. Everything I took with me, I declassified. That's not the way it works. Yes, the president, when they are president, they can decide I'm going to declassify stuff. But there's a process that you have to go through. He didn't go through that process. So now the dodge is, well, first it was like, I didn't take anything. And then it was like, well, Obama and Hillary, I guess they took stuff too. and now it's, well, it doesn't matter because I have a standing order that declassifies everything anyway. So he keeps moving the goalposts. And by the way, the stuff he said about Obama specifically, he said Obama took like 33 million documents or some preposterously high number. The National Archive came out and said that is categorically untrue. That is not true at all. Trump had an intermediary send a message to a Justice Department official to send to Garland, including that he'd heard people around the country are upset with the search. The country is on fire was the message. What can I do to reduce the heat? Huh. So, very sketchy, very questionable. Now, Trump, he also came out and said in a previous truth, they could have just asked me. Well, number one, they did ask you, and you didn't turn over everything. And number two, a day later, Trump comes out and says, I'm demanding all these documents be returned to me. They were taken from me illegally. You just said they should have just asked you, implying you would have handed everything over, which you didn't. And then you say, well, actually return all the documents to me. It's illegal for you to have them. The guy contradicts himself like it's a Guinness Book of World Records. Like it should go in the Guinness Book of World Records, how often he contradicts himself. So anyway, these are some of the updates to the story. Now, the debate that's going on now is, well, how and why did Donald Trump do this? Why did he take these documents that weren't just classified, weren't just top secret, they were the top secret of the top secret? Like, what was he doing with them? What was the point? Well, one school of thought is just flat out incompetence, being a total scatterbrain and an idiot, and being totally disorganized, basically thinking until the last minute that he was going to remain the president of the United States, and that somehow there would be a Hail Mary pass that makes it so, Biden doesn't get sworn in or whatever. And there were a few articles that came out with that as the main narrative. They spoke to some other ghouls in the Trump administration like John Bolton, and John Bolton said, like, oh, the way he handled classified material really stressed us all out because he was so nonchalant and blasé with it. And they say, like, he didn't even start packing until a week or two before he's supposed to move out of the White House, and people were just throwing shit in boxes and they were leaving. So that's one school of thought. Basically just, total carelessness, recklessness. He didn't care, incompetence, and he just happened to take these documents. I'm not sure I buy that. I mean, there's a number of reasons why I don't buy that, but one of the main reasons is, if that were the case, then when the FBI did come and said, hey, you got to turn over this information, he would have turned it all over. Anything that was even, remotely in the realm of potentially classified or top secret, any one of those boxes, he would have turned them all over, every last one of them. And he didn't do that. Which then begs the question, okay, well, what's the other school of thought here? The other school of thought is much more in the nefarious camp. So we talked about this a little bit in a breaking news video that Crystal and I did over the weekend. Oh, first, before I get to that, that's the Saudi Arabia theory. We'll get to that in just a second. Let me tell you guys the specific crimes in question here. This is what was in the warrant. So you can see all the, the letters and the numbers there. One of the crimes is gathering, transmitting, or losing defense information, which carries a penalty of up to 10 years in prison. Another one is concealment, removal, or mutilation generally, which carries a penalty of up to 3 years in prison and disqualification from holding office. Now, some people are questioning the constitutionality of that. So that's a broader debate to have. And then we also have the constitutionality of being disqualified from office, not the constitutionality of, up to 3 years in prison. Nobody argues that that's, off the table. And then we have destruction, alteration, or falsification of records in federal investigations and bankruptcy, which carries a penalty of up to 20 years in prison. So, now, some of these things, I guess, are part of the Espionage Act. There's been a bit of an uproar about that online. But what people need to understand is the Espionage Act doesn't mean, like, he's spying for a foreign power or whatever. I know it sounds like it does mean that, but there are parts of the Espionage Act which are just not that, and that's really what we're talking about here. So these are the main things that are in the warrant that you guys need to know about. So, now we get to the juicy part. Again, the Saudi theory. So, one of the arguments is, look, the reason why Donald Trump took a lot of this classified information, and we don't know the very specific nature of these classified and top secret documents because we're not supposed to know. We're not allowed to know. It's classified. It's top secret. And some of this stuff should genuinely be like that. Things involving, nuclear weapons. So one of the theories is he took it because he's in bed with the Saudis. His whole family is in bed with the Saudis. And the Saudis, for a long time, have been wanting nuclear information. They want to, know how to make nukes properly. They want their own nukes. And there's a lot of sensitive information around that. They have the access to it. And effectively, the Saudis are paying the Trumps for access to that information. So, one piece of evidence here that we talked about previously when this happened, this was June 3rd. House oversight investigating $2 billion Saudi investment in Jared Kushner's firm. So, Mohammed bin Salman, as part of, trying to rehabilitate the image of Saudi Arabia, he's been going around making all these business deals. He's been doing something called sports washing, which is like getting involved in major professional sports basically to try to deflect from the horrific things they do, whether it be the genocide in Yemen or the way they treat women or the way they treat gay people, etc. They're heavily involved in racing. They're heavily involved in golf now. They have their own league, buying off golfers left and right. They're also just doing standard investments with various financial interests in the U.S. And Jared Kushner got a $2 billion deal with them, which is way more, way above and beyond what anybody else got. And in fact, you had people in the Saudi government, some of them looked at it and said, this isn't a good investment. And Mohammed bin Salman overruled them and said, oh, yes, it is. And so this is super sketchy on its face. Super sketchy on its face. This is one of the things that people are pointing to, saying, is that effectively a payoff for something in return, something under the table, something behind the scenes that we don't know about? And what happened with these documents in Mar-a-Lago could be a piece of that. More. This gets creepy. This gets scary because this is like all the pieces seem to come together behind the scenes. Flashback, February 2019. This is from Judd Legum of Popular Information. Whistleblowers raise grave concerns with Trump administration's efforts to transfer sensitive nuclear technology to Saudi Arabia. So, I don't find this theory outlandish. I really don't. I don't find this theory outlandish at all. Everybody should have kept their eye on the ball the entire time. I mean, you guys remember the scandal. I was one of the only people who was covering it regularly. But Trump took hundreds of thousands of dollars through his D.C. hotel from the Saudis, and then, of course, he turned around and gave them a multi-billion-dollar weapons deal. He looked the other way as they murdered an American journalist, Jamal Khashoggi. Another piece of evidence is they just hosted a Saudi golf tour event, Live Golf Tour event, at Trump's course in Bedminster, New Jersey. And that golf tour is throwing him around money like you wouldn't believe. I mean, Phil Mickelson making like up to $200 million, Dustin Johnson making $100 million. These are figures nobody's ever seen. And the speculation is Trump himself got paid about $100 million from the Saudis to have one of their events at his course. And I think they have a long-term deal as well, where in the future, the Saudi golf tour will come back to Trump events, to Trump courses, I should say. That also is very sketchy. Now, that number, I should be clear, is not confirmed. The $2 billion to Jared Kushner is confirmed. The $300,000, which went to Trump's D.C. hotels while he was president, that is confirmed. And so there's an old saying, where there's smoke, there's fire. And look, I wouldn't rule out the incompetence and carelessness theory in terms of why Trump has those documents. It's certainly possible. But the way he's acted since being caught with the information does lead me to be more suspicious, and if anything, lean more in the direction of Saudi Arabia, the Saudi theory. So, guys, it was never, ever about Russiagate. It was always Saudi-gate. Because the fact of the matter is, and you guys have gone through the list with me before a number of times, we know Donald Trump increased the presence of NATO troops on Russia's border. We know he armed and funded Ukrainian rebels, something Obama had said, I'm not going to do because some of them are tied to extremist elements. Trump armed them. We know he killed a pipeline that the Russian government wanted desperately. So Trump's actual policies towards Russia were actually pretty hawkish. And so all of the cries about, oh my God, he's Vladimir Putin's puppet and there's some sort of P-tape and he's doing his bidding, and none of that ever came to fruition. And the Mueller report, of course, was never able to nail Trump on anything involving Russia. And I always thought that was hyperbolic. It was overstated. It was kind of dumb. There were a lot of conspiracy theories. So I say that to say this. This Saudi thing could be real. It could be real. Now, ultimately, we may never find out anyway. Why? Because the stuff that they're charging him with is more of the lower level things. Now, I say lower level, that's relatively speaking, because he's still facing potentially time behind bars. And the fact that he caught lying dead to rights, he was caught lying dead to rights, I mean, that's a tough one, dog. Now, we all know that famous old tweet about how Donald Trump wriggles his way out of everything. He still may do that somehow. So I'm not saying, strike three, you're out. But what I am saying is, this is serious. This is definitely serious. And so I guess we'll see what happens moving forward, but an FBI investigation into you, this specific, this deep in, this many clear charges, sort of caught red-handed, you could run as much interference as you want, and no doubt the right is going to do that. Republican politicians and right-wing media are going to do that, but it may come to naught when all's said and done, because they're on it right now. So anyway, that's the breakdown for you. That's the update. When we have more, I'll give you those as well. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.